Hey everyone, welcome to the open world of Warcraft, where we're 100% focused on open world PvE content in World of Warcraft, things like leveling, world quest, and delves. My name's Setsuko, and in this video what I want to do is go through the Evoker class talent tree and cover the talents that I think are good in open world content, those you can skip, and everything in between. Before we jump into talking about the Evoker class talents, however, I do want to mention that the Evoker is the newest class in World of Warcraft. It's also very unique. There's a lot of emphasis on helping other players depending on your specialization, and more so than many other classes, I feel like the class talent tree for Evoker, the values of talents change drastically based on the spec that you decide to build through your specialization talent tree. Many other classes on the class side of the talent tree, they have abilities that are just good regardless of your specialization, or not so good regardless of your specialization. But Evoker, I feel like there's a lot more weight behind your specialization build that will change your class talent emphasis. But I'm going to do the best I can to give you sort of a generalist overview of the talents on this tree without getting too much into the weeds about, on this particular build, and just try to keep it at like more of a higher surface level examination here. So we're going to start by getting into our starter talents for each specialization. So on the Preservation Evoker, we have two starter talents. We have Expunge and we have Verdant Embrace. Expunge is an instant cast ability with an 8-second cooldown that removes poisons. I don't find these effects to be very valuable in open world content because generally you're not going to find a poison that's so bad that you would take the time to remove it versus taking the time to remove the thing that's poisoning you. Now, if you're in a particular situation where that does matter, you can spec into this for a point and then spec back out of it. It's, entirely up to you, but in general, I'm not too worried about taking this. However, it does lead to that second starter talent, which is Verdant Embrace. Verdant Embrace is an instant cast ability with a 24-second cooldown that causes you to fly to an ally and heal them. Now, we're working under the assumption that you are playing solo here. You're doing your solo leveling, your world quests, solo delves, etc. You're not partnered up at this point. So flying to an ally and healing them, there's no one to fly to. However, if there is no one to fly to, you still heal yourself instead, and it's a pretty decent sized heal. So this is a pretty valuable ability on all three specializations here, and it's worth picking up if you don't already have a bunch of other ways to heal yourself. So for that reason, you might end up getting Expunge anyway. Moving to Devastation Evoker, we have Landslide and Natural Convergence. Landslide is a 1.5 minute AoE root. It'll root targets in place for 15 seconds. This can be pretty valuable on all three specializations. They're all ranged, so keeping enemies at a distance is nice. If you've got a group of 2 or 3 enemies and you can cast Landslide on them, lock 1 or 2 of them down while you focus on dealing with one target at a time, that could definitely be helpful. You could also pass on this if that's something that you're not worried about. However, it does go into Natural Convergence, which makes Disintegrate channel 20% faster. Disintegrate is a very good ability. I love using it, love building around it, and so for me, 20% faster channeling on Disintegration has a lot of value, and I would pick this up on all three specializations, which means I would also pick up Landslide. And then moving into Augmentation Evoker, they also have Landslide, and then their second ability is going to be Obsidian Scales. Obsidian Scales is an ability with a 1.5 minute recharge, and it will reduce damage that you take by 30% for 12 seconds. This is a very, very nice defensive ability. Not only does it have a relatively short cooldown already, but it lasts for 12 seconds, which is a pretty decent amount of time. Very nice pickup here if you feel like you need the defensive utility. It's right here at the top of the tree. It's going to lead you into other things in the talent tree. Definitely don't have to take it if you feel like you're okay, if you feel like you've got enough offense that you don't need the defense, or you've got other defensive options through like your specialization tree, but not a bad one to pick up for any specialization. So we covered everything on the top row here, and we've covered 2 of our 3 on the second row. So let's take a look at this final one on the second row here. Permeating Chill. Your damaging blue spells reduce the target's movement speed by 50% for 3 seconds. So again, this is another nice way to add that movement speed reduction so that you can keep enemies at a distance as a ranged class. Nice pickup here, but you might have other ways to do this. Maybe you can use landslide. You're doing big pulls, so that 1.5 cooldown is not too big of a deal. In general, this is a nice one to pick up though. And so I would really kind of recommend all 6 of these top ones here, but you can, take a point out here or there depending on if you need to save a talent point or put that talent point into other places. There's lots of good stuff on the Evoker tree. Moving down to our next row, we have Forger of Mountains. This reduces the cooldown of landslide by 30 seconds and makes it so it can withstand 200% more damage before breaking. Again, if you've locked in landslide and you're using that as kind of your root, your crowd control of preference, getting that down to a 1-minute cooldown is very significant. That's basically meaning that you can use landslide probably every single pull that you do. In addition, getting that increase in the damage that it'll take before it breaks means that you can deal more damage to the targets before they actually start moving towards you. Overall, if you're going landslide, this is a very nice pickup. You may find that you don't need it. Maybe you kill things quick enough, or maybe you kill them too slow and that 1.5 minute cooldown is okay. Then you could pass on this, but it's a nice quality of life if landslide's a major part of your kit. Next, we have Innate Magic. This causes our essence to regenerate 10% faster with 2 points. I like this a lot on all specializations. I would definitely pick this up so that we can get that resource back faster. Then in the middle here, we have Obsidian Scales has an additional charge, so you can take or leave this, I think, depending. If you're playing a style where you're not necessarily doing a lot of crowd control, you're kind of relying on that damage reduction from Obsidian Scales, that extra charge can be really nice, because then you can basically use Obsidian Scales for every pull that you do. But if you're playing something more CC oriented where you don't necessarily need the damage reduction as often, then getting an additional charge is not that big of a deal. It already has a 1.5 minute cooldown on it, which is pretty low for open world content. So whether or not you pick this up, I think it just kind of depends. So if you're going to go into this sort of landslide direction here, then maybe I would skip this. If you're going to go heavy into Obsidian Scales, could be a good pickup. Next, we have Enkindled. Living Flame deals 3% more damage and healing. With 2 points in, it does 6%. So this is one of the ones where I said it really depends on your build. You could super spec into Living Flame depending on your specialization, and this becomes very valuable. Or if you kind of skew away from doing like the red dragonflight magic and things like that, you may want to pass on this particular talent because it's not having as frequent of an impact as it would if you were spec'd into that side. Either way, if you do go into Living Flame, 6% more damage and healing is a very nice jump in damage and healing there, and I think it's worth the points to put those in if you are using this ability on a regular basis. Next, we have Scarlet Adaptation. So you store some of your effective healing, and then your next damaging Living Flame consumes all stored healing to increase its damage dealt. Again, same thing here sort of applies if you're using Living Flame. This could be valuable. That being said, you're going to be doing more damage than you're doing healing when you're playing in open world content, as opposed to in like a raid or a dungeon where you'll be doing a lot more healing. So I don't think you get as much value out of this particular talent point in open world content. And in general, I would probably skip it. Next, we have Quell. This is a mandatory pickup for every single specialization. It's the interrupt that we have here, and it has a ridiculously long 40-second cooldown. So we still want it though. We still want that interrupt. Pick it up on every single specialization. Next, we have Recall. You can reactivate your various flights and breaths within 3 seconds after landing to travel back in time to your takeoff location. I do like this depending on how I'm playing. Sometimes you want to do the breath and you want to just go from one place to the other, but a lot of times you want to do the recall. In open world content, I'm the source of aggro, and what I find is doing the breath, everything starts chasing me, and then I can recall back, and I've put some distance between myself and the things that were chasing me, and that's pretty valuable. So this is a nice place to put a point if you have a point to spare, but if you don't, it's not a big deal if you don't pick this one up. Next, we have a choice node between Heavy Wing Beats and Clobbering Sweep. So Heavy Wing Beats is going to reduce Buffet's cooldown by 45 seconds. So if we come down here and we look at our Buffet, which is not coming up. Okay, no problem there. Buffet is going to have the cooldown reduced by 45 seconds. Clobbering Sweep is going to reduce the cooldown of Tail Swipe by 45 seconds. Buffet will push enemies back, and then Tail Swipe will knock them back as well. So if you're using those abilities a lot as a CC, you could put a point into these. Personally, I don't usually pick these up. I would rather put this point into getting something like Landslide if I don't already have it, or getting the cooldown reduction on Landslide, etc., as a way to crowd control opponents instead. The next talent point we have here is Tailwind. Hover increases your movement speed by 70% for the first 4 seconds. So you don't actually have a lot of just sort of like bursty movement speed abilities on a Evoker. Surprisingly, you do have like your flying and different things like that. But if we're talking like group to group sort of mobility, there's not a whole lot in there for the Evoker. So I actually find Tailwind to be pretty valuable because I can use Hover as a burst of movement speed to get from group to group. So I typically will pick this up on all 3 specializations. Next, we have Cauterizing Flame. So this ability has a 1-minute cooldown. You cauterize an ally's wounds, removing bleed, poison, cure, and disease, and then healing if you remove any of those effects. Now, I mentioned up here that I don't find a lot of value in an ability that's going to remove a poison effect. However, Cauterizing Flame, I do think, is a decent pickup for a couple of reasons. One, it removes multiple things, a lot, not just a magic or disease. It's bleed, poison, cure, disease, generally most of the stuff that's going to hit you. And on top of that, it heals you if you remove an effect. Mandatory pickup? Not at all, but not a bad one to have here, especially if you're in an area where you are getting poison, curse, disease, bleed, etc. on a regular basis. This can be really nice to have. Moving on to our next row, we have Ancient Flame. Casting Emerald Blossom or Verdant Embrace reduces the cast time of your next living flame by 40%. Again, how much are you healing? How much are you using Emerald Blossom or Verdant Embrace? Are you spec'd into Living Flame? You know, this talent to me is very, very highly dependent upon your build that you're using. So if you're very spec'd into Living Flame, I mean, cast time reduction by 40% is very, very nice. So this could be worth the pickup. You will typically use Emerald Blossom and Verdant Embrace, things like that, to kind of throw out some healing every now and again. So it really just depends. From a generic perspective, though, I'm probably going to skip on this and use that talent point elsewhere for some sort of generic buff that's, you know, usable across all specializations and builds. Next, we have Instinctive Arcana. So your magic damage done is increased by 2%. We can put 2 points in to get that 4%. This is exactly the kind of generic talent point I was just talking about. We do magic damage across all 3 specializations. I would pick this up on all of those specializations. Next, we have Tip the Scales. This is a 2-minute cooldown ability that makes your next empowered spell instantly cast at its maximum empower level. If you're not familiar with this, you can hold down certain Evoker abilities and they do different effects as you build them up over time. This makes it so that you can do that in its instant cast. So this is a very good ability to pick up for when you do want to kind of start off a rotation or, you know, something like that with a fully empowered spell. This can be a little cheat way to do that, potentially on a rare spawn, boss, etc. It also leads us into a lot of the rest of the tree here in the middle, which we might want to pick up. So good starter spot for that. Definitely not a mandatory pickup by any means, but we probably will pick it up just because it leads us into so much of the rest of the tree. Next, we have Attune to the Dream. So this is a little bit different depending on your specialization, but for Devastation and Preservation, your healing done and received are increased by 6% when you get 2 points in, and that's 4% for Augmentation. Not too worried about picking this up. We have plenty of ways to heal ourselves. I'm generally more focused on how do we do damage. But if we have picked up Cauterizing Flame, this could be a nice one to roll us into some more talent points down the tree. Definitely not a bad pickup, but not a priority pickup by any means. And then we have Sleepwalk. This is a 1.5 second cast, 15-second cooldown ability that disorients a target, making them walk towards you. Any damage you do can break the effect. Again, I don't find these to be super valuable. I would rather spec in a landslide, put a point into that cooldown, something along those lines, you know, pick up like Permeating Chill here, etc., instead of relying on Sleepwalk to disorient enemies for me. On the next row, we have Regenerative Magic. Your Leech is increased by 2%. Leech is nice. You're going to be doing damage, and you can heal back some of the damage that you deal. I would pick this up on all 3 specializations. Next, we have Inherent Resistance. So this will reduce magic damage taken by 4%, up to 8% with 2 points in for Devastation and Preservation, and 4% for Augmentation. Definitely not a mandatory pickup here, but a nice to have if you have points to spare. In the middle, we have Draconic Legacy. This increases your stamina by 6%. More health is always good in my book, especially if you're solo. And so that's reason enough to grab Tip the Scales to put a point into Draconic Legacy. Next, we have Extended Flight. Hover lasts 2 seconds longer. With 2 points in, it lasts 4 seconds longer. So this one, you can take it or leave it depending on how often you're using hover and whether you want to get into the points on the next side of the tree here. Our movement speed boost only lasts for the first 4 seconds of hover, so extending the duration doesn't give us more increased movement speed time. So really it just depends on whether you want the hover effect itself to last longer. Next, we have Bountiful Bloom. Emerald Bloom heals 2 additional allies. Hard pass on this one. Again, we're probably playing solo. We're not worried about healing even more allies with our Emerald Blossom. Moving on to the next row, we have Blast Furnace. Fire Breath's damage over time lasts 4 seconds longer. Fire Breath is great. It's a nice damage over time ability that you have. Extending the duration on that can be good, unless you are finding that you are killing everything before Fire Breath has run out. So if you're not, this is worth picking up. It's also nice against rare spawns, elites, and bosses. But you just kind of gotta look at that. If I Fire Breath, does it go away, but you know, before the enemy has died, or am I killing everything beforehand? Depending on the scenario, this could be worth picking up for you. Next, we have Exuberance. While above 75% health, your movement speed is increased by 10%. So this is one that I really like. Movement speed to me is always valuable in open world content. Right above that, we've got that magic damage taken reduction here. So I would probably grab those to get that movement speed. I prefer physical damage reduction over magic because we're going to take a lot more auto attack damage than we are going to take spell damage in general for most enemies. But this is generic magic damage reduction, so it's not a specific type. So it is, in my opinion, the best kind of magic damage reduction that we can get, so it's not too bad. In the middle here, we have Renewing Blaze. This is an instant cast ability with a 1.5-minute cooldown. The flames of life surround you for 8 seconds. While this is active, 100% of the damage you take is healed back over 8 seconds. Really like this ability, especially if you're going to do a big pull or if you're going to fight a rare spawn, elite, boss, etc. It can be nice to pop this right at the start just to give yourself a lot of mitigation there as you go into those sort of tougher pulls. Against 1-2 targets, I probably wouldn't be using this, but if you're doing bigger pulls or fighting tougher enemies, this can be really nice. Then we have Walloping Blow. Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe knock enemies further and daze them, reducing movement speed by 70% for 4 seconds. Again, I'm probably going to pass on this in general. I'm probably okay with just the generic Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe abilities on top of the other CC abilities that we're going to have. So I could save a talent point here. And then the final one on this row, we have Panacea, Emerald Blossom, and Verdant Embrace instantly heal you for a certain amount when cast. Again, it's okay here. The instant healing is going to be quite nice if you need it. So I would just say kind of take a look at where you're at and see if you're speccing into any of this other stuff in general. It would probably be something like Extended Flight into Panacea, but you know, I'm probably going to be passing on this in general unless I really want to get to this side of the tree over here. Moving on to our next row, we have Unravel. So this is an instant ability with a 9-second cooldown that sunders an enemy's protective magic. It does a bunch of damage to absorb shields. If you're fighting enemies with absorb shields and you want this, this could be really handy. It has a very low cooldown and will do a bunch of damage to those shields. But outside of that, I would skip this talent point. Next, we have Protracted Talons. Azure Strike damage deals damage to one additional enemy. I do really like this a lot. So I will pick this up on every specialization, which means I'll grab the Fire Breath for that into Azure Strike. You can pass on this. It's not mandatory by any means, but I've almost never found a build where I didn't want to hit as many things as possible with Azure Strike damage in open world content. Then we have Oppressing Roar. This is a 2-minute cooldown ability that increases the duration of crowd control effects on enemies by 50% for the next 10 seconds. Really, for open world content, you know, if you're setting up a really major pull, maybe you want to use this, but in general, I'm not worried about this talent at all. Not worried about this ability, not with the 2-minute cooldown, not with pairing it with other CC, so I'm probably going to pass on this. Next, we have a choice node between Foci of Life. Renewing Blaze restores you more quickly, causing damage you take to be healed back over 4 seconds. So this is boosting the Renewing Blaze ability if you pick it up. Or Fire Within reduces the cooldown by 30 seconds, taking it to a 1-minute cooldown. So it's up to you. You can take Fire Within and then basically use Renewing Blaze on every pull, assuming that you're going to be pulling 2, 3, 4, 5 things at the same time. That could be a really nice thing to do. Otherwise, I would pick up Foci of Life so that you get the healing back faster, which is going to make that damage that you're taking a lot more sustainable. So not a mandatory pickup at all, but I feel like if you're going to pick up Renewing Blaze, you know, getting a modification to it is a pretty good idea here. If you really have somewhere else you want to spend the point, fine. But if you got a spare point, I would definitely pick this up. And then again, depending on your build, you know, so if you're pulling a lot, go for Fire Within. If you're not, then I'd go for Foci of Life. Next, we have Rescue. Swoop to an ally and fly with them to the target location. Again, you're not going to have an ally, so let's just pass on this one. Then we have Lush Growth. Green spells restore 5% more health. Again, you're probably doing okay with your healing in general. Don't know that you need the points in here. It's not like you're healing a tank in a dungeon or a raid, so you're probably going to be fine. Next, we have Source of Magic. Redirect your excess magic to a friendly healer for an hour. When you cast an empowered spell, you restore some of their mana. Again, there's not going to be another friendly healer, so pass. Next, we have Leaping Flames. Fire Breath causes your next living flame to strike one additional target per empower level. This is not too bad. It makes your living flame much more AoE. You can get up to 3 levels on this. So you can really hit a larger number of targets. But then if we go straight down here, this makes it so that your Breath of Eons or Deep Breath stuns enemies for 3 seconds via Terror of the Skies. Now, I really like the stun on enemies with our Deep Breath there. It does kind of, you know, work counterintuitively to recall here. Generally, if I am going to do a breath and then teleport back to where I was, I would like for those enemies to be chasing after me as I'm finishing the breath. So when I teleport, there's more space between me and them. So I wouldn't necessarily take recall if I was going to go down into Terror of the Skies. Terror of the Skies, I'm, you know, doing that breath, flying over, everything's getting stunned. And then I can, turn around and attack the enemies that I just flew over. So a nice ability here. I would probably go one or the other with Recall versus Terror of the Skies, depending on what your goals are. But a 3-second stun is pretty nice in general. And for that reason, I think that you might end up picking up Leaping Flames, but I don't consider either one of these to be very mandatory. Next, we have Overall. This makes a Pressing Roar remove an Enrage effect from each enemy and reduce the cooldown by 30 seconds. Again, I'm not wanting to pick up a Pressing Roar, so I'm not picking up this talent either. In the middle here, we have Hover gains 1 additional charge. To me, this is a mandatory pickup. I don't want to pick up a Pressing Roar. Rescue is pretty useless, so I'm probably going to go here and pick up Foci of Life or Fire Within, whichever one based on what we talked about, so that I can pick up Aerial Mastery. Giving Hover an additional charge to me is a big deal because it means you have 2 uses of that increased movement speed that you get from Tailwind here, not necessarily because of the Hover effects themselves, and it just gives you more movement, and like I said, I'm a big fan of that in open world content. That brings us to a choice node where we have Spatial Paradox, a 3-minute cooldown ability that creates a paradox for you and a friendly healer, allowing casting while moving and increasing the range of most spells by 100% for 10 seconds. In general, we're not going to get the benefit of someone else in our party being able to use this. And also, I'm not too worried about casting while moving. Generally, the only thing I really think is kind of cool on this one is the increased range for most spells. But is it worth a talent point in a 3-minute cooldown? I don't think it is. And then we have Time Spiral. This is an instant cast with a 2-minute cooldown. You bend time, allowing you and your allies within 40 yards to cast their major movement ability once in the next 10 seconds, even if it's on cooldown. Generally, for your Evoker, the stuff that you can cast with this is not very practical to use in combat and things like that. So I don't find a lot of value in this one either. So for me, this choice node is a skip. Next, we have Twin Guardian. Rescue protects you and your ally from harm, absorbing damage equal to 30% of your max health. We're not picking up Rescue, so we're probably passing on this as well. Over here, we have Potent Mana. Source of Magic, which is this ability here that, again, we're probably not picking up. Increases the target's healing and damage done by 3%. Again, easy pass there. And then finally, we have Zephyr. 2-minute cooldown that conjures an updraft that lifts you and your 4 nearest allies within 20 yards into the air, reduces damage you take from AoE attacks, and increases your movement speed. Again, we don't have a bunch of party members to use this on. It's on a 2-minute cooldown. We would have to put talents into a bunch of stuff we really don't want to get here, so this is a pass for me as well. So chances are we're going Leaping Flames. Maybe we're getting Terror of the Sky. Maybe we're getting Recall. We're coming back, to maybe pick up Cauterizing Flames, Attune to the Dream, stuff like that. We're going to pick up the cooldown reduction on Landslide, etc. You can kind of see that we're going to have a lot of free points and things that we can do, mostly because this whole section of the talent tree here is all stuff that we're not really worried about picking up for open world content. So that's my thoughts on the Evoker class talent tree and what's good versus what you can possibly skip for open world content. Hopefully this was helpful to you. If it was, throw a like on the video, subscribe, support the channel, help us grow, and share the video with someone who's going to play Evoker in the War Within. I appreciate you taking time to watch one of my videos, and I'll see you on the next one.